In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos podcast. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. We've got another exciting episode for you as the Argos continue to sign players seemingly every single hour. And we've got some really nice additions this week as positional groups start to get rounded out a little bit. JB, were you surprised at the number of signings we had this week?
I might have been a month ago, but this seems to be the Argos plan. And every week it's going to be an avalanche of new signings. Absolutely.
It's exciting too, but I thought we were pretty much done last week. I knew obviously they had to bring in a backup quarterback. They brought in 3, and I figured that they would bring in a few linebackers, and that's sort of the one thing they didn't really add a lot of. Like, we added 2, but I've been waiting for that big splash, high-profile linebacker ad, and we still haven't seen that yet. But why don't we go through the guys that we did see added? So Nick Arbuckle was the only quarterback on the Argos roster the last time we talked. 3 different guys have been brought in this week, and what's funny to me is the guy I'm actually most excited about now is the only one of the 3 I hadn't heard of. So Antonio Pipkin comes in. We saw him play a little bit in Montreal. Kelly Bryant comes in, who was very exciting when I saw that flash across my Twitter notifications. He was quarterback at Clemson, and then he transferred to Mizzou. And, it was very high profile, really exciting to watch. And then the third guy, Nick Tiano, who I hadn't heard of at all. And so over the past day, I've been watching Chattanooga, Tennessee film to see who this guy is. And I got to tell you, I am extremely impressed with what I've seen from Tiano. And I can't believe I hadn't heard of him before. And I can't believe no one else has picked up on this guy.
Yeah, I mean, the Argos clearly have looked south. They clearly have people looking for, as I hoped they would, looking for D1 players who didn't get a look in the NFL, didn't make practice squads, went to camps, but didn't make practice squad. That's a huge pool of talent. And I think, for them to go get a quarterback of this quality who was at least talked about as being draftable in the NFL draft, I think is an absolute coup.
Looking at the 3 of them, it's hard to say who's going to end up coming away with the backup job because we've got a lot of way to go still. But man, I really like the stuff I saw from Tiano, and I'll give you just sort of a quick breakdown on all 3 guys. So Pipkin, we saw him play a little bit. He had some experience, and he was really exciting to watch. He's a really easy guy to cheer for too. He played D2 for the Tiffin Dragons in Ohio. He has a really nice deep ball. He's got good mobility, and those 2 things alone really make him exciting. But his accuracy kind of breaks down as it gets closer to the line of scrimmage, which is a little bit odd. You'd think that those shorter passes are easier to make, but not for him. He struggles a little bit with those short balls. They're just inconsistent. Sometimes it's right on the money, sometimes not. But that deep ball is exciting, and that will be what wins him the second job if he gets it. Because he can throw those sideline bombs on the money. And he's got really good speed, like I said. Kelly Bryant, definitely the most high profile of the 3 guys playing at both Clemson and Mizzou. His strength for me, he's a really accurate passer for the short to intermediate stuff. And he's got the same kind of speed that Pipkin has. Both those guys run a 4.6. Really nice agility. The issue that I think the NFL had with Bryant was his deeper stuff. So he gets less accurate as you get deeper downfield, and most people do. But what separates the elite quarterbacks and the guys that make it from the guys that don't tends to be that guys that don't, often their accuracy falls off somewhere. And for Bryant, it tends to be on those deeper throws. He also, while he runs really well, doesn't actually throw very well on the run. And so that's something that he can work on. But he's young. Pipkin's young too. Bryant, I think, is 24. Pipkin, 25. And then Nick Tiano, also 24 years old. He doesn't have the same level of athleticism that Bryant and Pipkin has. He's not slow, but he's not a runner. He's a pocket passer. He's 6'5", 240. He's a pretty big guy. Now, he is super accurate. I love what I saw from him with decision making. It makes really good reads, just generally makes the right decision on every play. Now, he doesn't have the ability to get out of trouble when things start to go wrong. He doesn't have that mobility, that escapability. Like I said, he's not a bad athlete, but it's just not a bonus that you kind of look for in a backup quarterback. It's nice to have somebody that can scramble around a little bit to, buy some time, because it's a guy that's getting a lot fewer reps typically and doesn't necessarily have as much experience in the offense. And so having some feet helps. And that's something that is going to be what holds Tiano down. If he ends up not getting that second job, it'll probably be because of his speed. But man, I love his brain.
Yeah, it's hard for me to get inside the head of the Argos with these signings. I mean, I love the accumulation of talent. I think each of these signings has some strings attached to it, or complications, if you will. Obviously, Bryant is the cousin of Martavis, and that's complicated to bring in somebody's cousin and cut him. So I feel like he has a very good chance of making the squad. And I can't imagine, that this kid's coming up from the States to play backup in the CFL. He must feel like he is going to come in and win the job. He's just out of college. He didn't make an NFL team last year, but he had interest. I can't imagine that he thinks he's coming up here to run practice squads.
And the other thing that's kind of funny is that none of these three guys are at all like Nick Arbuckle. And so, no. usually when you bring up a guy to be a backup, you bring somebody of the same mold. You say, okay, well, we're designing our offense around this guy, and so the guys that you bring in tend to be similar in some way. And none of these guys are like Arbuckle. So, yeah, I don't really know what to make of that either. But if you look at them as individual signings, all three of them have the potential to be a really good quarterback. And I think all three guys are coming into this believing that they're capable of being a CFL starter. And so if that's what they're going for, great. There's gonna be a really healthy competition.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, I think. Because for sure, this is what you would do at most positions on the team. You bring in 20 DBs, you bring in 25 DL, and, ideally you run a meritocracy and you keep the best 7 guys. Traditionally, that's never been done at quarterback. It's just not how that position has been treated in the past in professional football. Usually you have the franchise chosen player who is the one, and you might bring in guys who are clearly 2s. So that's a very interesting dynamic. I do wonder what conversations are between everyone and who loves Arbuckle and who's not sure.
Well, the thing is too, and as much as we think Arbuckle's the guy, and clearly the Argos do as well. Maybe. But Arbuckle was never as high profile as any of these guys.
No, that's what I mean. So, I mean, it's it feels like.
I'll correct that. He was more high profile than Antonio Pipkin, but he wasn't. He didn't have the interest that from the NFL that Bryant or Tiano had, and so yeah, interesting.
And I think the issue that they may run into is just really hard at the quarterback position to get reps spread around. And that's why a lot of teams don't have quarterback competitions per se, because it just doesn't lend itself like other positions do to having guys split the reps. It just doesn't work. Like, you can't be like, okay, Arbuckle, you're only going to take 10 snaps today because we want to look at the other guys. Now you don't have anybody prepared for the game. So it's a fascinating dilemma. I'm glad it's not my dilemma.
No
and I'm glad that I get to watch it.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Other guys that were brought in on offense, Matt Colburn II was brought in at running back. I don't know too much about him. 5'8", 210. Seems like a really good athlete. He's had some success, but I don't really know what to make of that signing. I can't get too much out of it myself. At receiver, you've got two guys brought in that are both pretty high profile. So the biggest name is Kendall Wright, former first-round draft pick Kendall Wright. And he's got a really interesting story, too. A successful NFL player. He's had a 5 or 6 year NFL career, and longer than that now. But yeah, he played with the Titans. He was drafted 20th overall in the first round. Runs a 4.4, is a great playmaker, great agility, not a good blocker. And I think that's something that didn't endear him to his coaches. And I think that's why he ended up in a series of these 1-year deals, because he was hurting teams in their run game. But like, this guy was Chicago's leading receiver just a few seasons ago. So we know he can still do it. It'll be interesting to see how his game translates to the CFL game. I would think quite well, assuming he's still got that speed, because the things that he struggled with aren't nearly as big a factor in the CFL. And so, you know, I'd like to see what he can produce. But man, that's a nice get.
Well, I'm sure if you're a current Toronto Argo, Twitter has become a bit of House of Horrors, as you are sort of perpetually getting updates that 5 more high-profile people are coming for your job.
Yeah, imagine like a month ago, you're going to, let's say you're a receiver a month ago. You're like, okay, I think I got a pretty good shot at making the squad. And then every week they seem to add this, you know, high-profile. And here we got another like a first-round NFL pick. And you kind of see yourself sliding further down the depth chart. But it's going to be a great competition. And like we've said all along, just because you're a first-round pick in the NFL, it doesn't mean that's going to translate into success in the CFL. And in fact, more often than not, it doesn't. So, you know, there's a lot of football to be played, a lot of decisions to be made.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the guys who have been there and have played in the CFL and know how to be successful, that's an incredible edge for them. They don't have that learning curve. And yeah, I definitely feel like it will be harder for these American guys to make the team than they probably feel.
Jeremy Davis was the other receiver that was brought in. He's another 5-year NFL veteran. He's mostly been a special teams player. He's a good receiver, though. 6'3", really good athlete. I have a memory of him that could have been a really negative memory. It turned out to be okay, but he almost single-handedly beat my Michigan Wolverines back in 2013. Connecticut somehow was up by, I think they were up by 10 late. And it was almost entirely on the back of Jeremy Davis, who just kept making these crazy circus catches. And I think that game is probably what put him on the radar. But yeah, he can play wideout, even though he's only played specials in the NFL really over the last 5 seasons. I expect him to compete at the wide receiver position too. He's just a great athlete, and he's got that size that they seem to really covet with the number of 6'4" receivers we brought in. Jeremy Davis just a hair under that.
I think the other challenge that the team's going to have is, and we can get into, you know, conversations about will this season even happen, but I think it's going to be tough. I mean, you're not going to have a full exhibition schedule. You know, I think the ability to pare down is really going to be challenging to evaluate. So it's you know, it's a fascinating combo of 100 lottery tickets and very little time to decide, but it's interesting.
And one of the unfortunate things of this, and I think we can see this coming, I think everyone can see this coming, there are going to be a number of players cut by the Argos out of necessity who will not only sign with other teams, but will start for other teams. And there's some positional groups where you could probably take the entire, you know, third tier of Argos players and find places for them on other CFL teams right now. So that's going to be upsetting when we seem to be making the rest of the league better come cut time. Let's look at some of the defensive signings we made. I guess the highest profile, is Odell Willis. What'd you make of this signing? He's starting to get up there.
Well, I mean, I know there was some Twitter chatter about how old the defensive line room was going to be for the Argos. I think that's probably a fair shot. You know, Odell is getting up there in age. He is, you know, an all-time player.
Absolutely.
You know, he is absolutely a legend. I feel like it's worth a shot to see if he has one more season in him. I don't want to reduce him down to one. His sack totals and his tackle totals have declined, as you would expect of a player heading into his late 30s. But if you can have a depth that they seem to have in terms of bringing guys in on sub packages and keeping them fresh and keeping their snap count low, I don't see any reason why you would turn away an all-time CFLer.
Little things like being able to have guys like Boris Beatty do both punting and kicking duties are going to be what allows this team to keep more guys like defensive ends, for example, who can rotate in. Usually that's something you fight with because obviously we can't have Odell Willis out there on special teams and Charleston Hughes out there on special teams. Like, that's not going to happen. And so you need other guys that are active who are playing in those roles. So then on these crucial plays, these crucial, second down and 12s, with the game on the line, you can send in Willis, you can send in Hughes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you put them on either end, or you stack them, and in obvious passing situations, he has over 100 sacks. I think it's a terrific idea to bring him in. I know, there was some laughter about it, but I don't see any reason why he can't have one more good season.
I think especially if he's not being counted on every down.
Yeah, exactly. He got to keep his reps low and basically use them 10 times a game.
The combined age of Odell Willis and Charleston Hughes is the same as the combined age of the three backup quarterbacks we just brought in.
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep those guys fresh. I mean, if we can get teams into, second and 9, second and 8, unleash the hounds.
And of course, the Argos signed 2 other defensive ends this week as well. We've got Dwayne Hendricks, who's 24 years old, which is, something given the age of some of the other defensive ends we've brought in, and also Sean Oakman. So, there's something to say about both of these guys. What do you think, JB?
Yeah, Hendricks is young, which is great to see, and he has professional experience in the NFL. He was on the Miami practice squad. He was on the Bears practice squad. I think, much more than a camp invite. If you're on a practice squad, that means you have real talent. So I'm really excited about him. The Argos obviously scouted the XFL, smartly, and he had a good run in the XFL in their 5 games. Why not? Why not bring somebody in young and fast with great measurables?
And what about Sean Oakman? This is one that I think, he's been a very polarizing figure in his time in football.
Sean Oakman is a huge player. He's famous for having that grill mask that teenagers quickly went out and bought and then were told we're not allowed to use. His measurables are impressive. His shadow is impressive. I think the issue, of course, with Oakman is he does have some issues in his past with aggression and assault. I trust Pinball. I trust his evaluation. I trust his character judgment. I believe in second chances. If a player is truly repentant and is doing things to make up for being in these situations. He was found not guilty, so I guess I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But I mean, if it were up to me, I wouldn't have signed him. But I'm going to have to trust Pinball on this.
It's usually interesting to note when somebody that was at one point expected to be a high first round draft pick and he isn't taken at all by the NFL.
That's worrying, obviously, and the NFL has their own investigators, and for a player to have red flags bright enough that no team was willing to draft him is certainly not encouraging. But I don't know what he's done in his life in the last couple of years, so it would be wrong for me to speak of it. Let's let's see what he says, and let's see what the organization says.
And my hope is that he's matured and he's learned from these experiences and from what he's been through, and is ready to now make a difference in more ways than just on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that he addresses it. That'll be my main thing. I think it needs to be addressed. It can't just be, well, that's the past and I'm moving on. I think that it needs to be addressed, and I hope the Argos franchise does so.
The other two defensive guys that were signed, Richard Clayette, linebacker, and defensive back Tavares McFadden. I know a little bit of Clayette. I don't really know much about McFadden other than he was at Florida State. What do you make of these two guys?
Well, I think it again shows they're spending money on looking at the South. That they've decided that it's important. The XFL being a big area for them to research. I'm all for it. I've talked about last year about needing to find the market inefficiency. That's important for franchises to find, and they may have found this market inefficiency here, that teams are not looking at the XFL, teams are not looking at players who get cut from practice squads and are not able to convince them. It's not money. It's not like they're offering them huge paychecks. I'm fascinated by how the Argos seem to have found a way to get these guys to come up where, maybe nobody asked them before. I think it's great.
Clayette's an interesting one because he has bounced around to so many teams in the NFL. He was a 6th-round draft pick of the Houston Texans, got injured in his rookie season, and just was never able to rebound from that. And he went from team to team and then ended up in the XFL, and that seemed to be a springboard to here, like so many other guys that we've talked about. So yeah, hopefully he's got something. Like there clearly was something at one point. So let's see what he's got left in the tank. And then McFadden, another Florida State guy. There's so many Florida State players that the Argos have got under contract, it seems, at the moment. They must have a guy there. They must have a close contact at Florida State. It's not by accident that these Seminoles keep appearing on the Argos roster.
Yeah, I mean, Pinball's from Florida.
Yeah.
He may still have Florida football connections. I'm sure he does.
I think Pinball probably has connections in every country in the world by now, just on Pinball.
Yeah, he's not one to forget people or people forget him, So, and look, he may be closing these deals. I don't think we can underestimate that. I mean, anybody who's ever had a chance to talk to him knows that you would probably do anything he asked. He just has that sort of rock star level charisma. And he comes across completely sincere, and he may be closing these deals to bring these guys up here to give him a chance.
And just to cap off the signings for the week, we had 3 guys that were brought back. So linebacker Jordan Moore and receiver Damien Jean-Pierre. Both guys, so Moore was just recently had his contract expire, and they've brought him back again. Jean-Pierre, you might remember in 2019, we had him on the roster. I think it was September or October. It was late in the season. It was around the same time they got Bishop Sankey. And he was a receiver I talked about then as being very excited about because he ran a 4.4. He was just undersized for the NFL at about 170. But he's exactly the kind of guy that can thrive in the CFL. And I think that's what they were thinking back in 2019. So he's back here again in a much more competitive and crowded receiver room. So we'll see what he can do. And Jordan Moore has largely been a special teams contributor, but he's another guy that's waiting to make that next step. And it's a linebacker room where there are going to be opportunities. And then the third guy is Fabian Foote, defensive tackle Fabian Foote, who I'm really excited to have back. Of all these defensive signings, that's probably the one I'm most excited about this week.
I think it's terrific that they brought him back. It was such a weird dynamic. Contracts were signed and then there was no season. And then do you re-up that contract? Do you pretend that contract never happened? I think it's a good sign that they, basically said, you signed with us as a free agent and we'd like to do that again. I think that's organizationally a good look. And I think he's a great talent to bring in. I think he's obviously a terrific character individual, and he's going to be, he's Canadian. plug him in on that line. I think he's an excellent addition.
Yeah, those are all things I was going to say. Great character guy and one of the hardest workers on the team. Nobody has outworked Fabian Foote. You see, like, you go to his Twitter page, you look at some of the videos of him working out. It's insane the type of weight that he's pushing and pulling, and he's absolutely transformed himself too. He looks like an action hero, except a 300-pound chiseled action hero somehow. So, he's a guy that I can't wait to see on the field, and a guy that, I've been cheering for the whole way too, because he's such an easy guy to root for.
Yeah, it's an interesting makeup on that line. We got a lot of beef in the middle, which is great, and then a lot of quarterback hunters on the edge. But I hope that edge can hold. Being February and Black History Month, I thought that we would take a moment to take a look at some achievements by an African American in the CFL. And this may sound obvious or like a clear choice, but I don't think Michael Clemens gets nearly the credit he deserves as a coach. He was the first African American man to win a professional championship as coach.
Right.
And I think that is overlooked. And I think his entire coaching career is absolutely undervalued and underappreciated in CFL media, and probably among CFL fans. He has 67 wins as a coach. He's only behind Bob Obilovich. I think in people's minds, maybe, Pinball came in the middle of the season and kind of turned it around. And, he was a coach for 6 seasons, and he won a lot of football games.
He's everything a head coach should be. What's so great about Pinball? We could spend a year of podcasts talking about what's so great about Pinball, but I think in terms of being a head coach, he's an amazing leader. He can get anybody to follow him. He's just got that charisma and that sincerity, and he can convince anyone to do anything. And I think having a leader like that as a head coach is awesome, but he's not afraid to delegate, even when he knows how to do what he's asking people to do. He's not afraid to have guys step into those roles. He has full faith in his coordinators. He doesn't overstep the professional sort of boundaries there between, well, I don't want to say too much to this guy or this guy. He knows it all, but he's going to let everyone do their jobs because he has faith that the guys he's brought in know how to do their jobs and will. And so I think that's one of the things that makes him has made him such a successful head coach, is he has this trust that the people he's brought in will do their jobs and know how to do their jobs. And I think that's confidence inspiring when you're the guy in that role.
Yeah, I think he needs to be, be given his flowers, be given his praise, because first of all, as an African American, he was a trailblazer in the world of coaching, because for so long, like quarterback, he's fighting against racist beliefs about who can coach, who can be in charge, who can be a quarterback, who can think the game. I mean, there's no doubt that was a challenge, and I think that he's not recognized there with Wally Buono or Obilovich or these sort of names of CFL lore, because I don't think he's given the respect, and I think that that's connected to him being an African American, which is really why I'm kind of highlighting why people need to recognize how great a coach he was. He went to 5 straight East Finals, as a head coach, including winning the Grey Cup. So 6, really. That's an amazing accomplishment. Imagine that now. Imagine if the Argos went to 6 straight East Finals.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about. It's a huge achievement, and and it's also funny to think about, Pinball Clemens being under-recognized, because he's such a household name, and such a, this sort of iconic face and figure, and yet he is under-recognized 100% as a coach, and the things that he's been able to do post-playing career.
And sort of my last kind of point on that, again, in terms of recognizing the greatness of his coaching, is he was nominated 5 years in a row for Coach of the Year and never won. And looking back at it, there are different reasons. You can look at different seasons, but I mean, the two seasons that really pop out to me where I feel, frustrated that he wasn't given that official recognition. First of all, is 2004.
Right.
From everything I can see, they made the Coach of the Year decision in February, that they took the whole season into account. So the season plus the playoffs, plus the final. So if you're looking at pinball coaching for the whole season, they win 10 games in the regular season. They go to the Grey Cup. They win the Grey Cup. First African-American coach to win the Grey Cup. And this coming the year after he went to the Eastern Final. So it's not like he came out of nowhere. I think the fact that they gave Coach of the Year to Greg Marshall, who rebounded a Ticat team, from 1 win to 9-8-1. Okay, so that's good. But come on. That is not better than winning the Grey Cup. I was really frustrated by that. I mean, in that season, 2004, pinball beat Hamilton and Greg Marshall, and they beat Wally Buono and BC, who were the two coaches nominated against him. Even if you could argue Greg Marshall's rebound was better, then you look at 2005, the next year, he was beaten out by Tom Higgins, who, again, on a rebound, he rebounded the Stamps to the same record that the Argos had. But he lost in the first round of the playoffs, and the Argos made it to the Eastern Final. I just don't see how you can give it to Tom Higgins, for the second time in 3 years, knowing that you should have given it to him in 2004. So, really, I think it's really frustrating that the football writers never acknowledged pinball as Coach of the Year. And, you could get into why that would be, but I think if you look at the numbers, any argument you put forward, I think is a little disingenuous to suggest that pinball could be nominated 5 times and never win.
Looking back, it definitely feels like a miss.
Yeah, so credit to Michael Clemens. He is an amazing coach.
I want to tell one of my favorite Pinball Clemens stories, and I apologize if I've told this before. I don't think I have on a podcast. I've been fortunate enough to meet Pinball on a number of occasions, but it's my very first meeting with him that stuck with me, and I think kind of tells you a little bit about the type of character he is. So I think I was in grade 9, and he was playing. He was signing autographs at the Foot Locker at Dufferin Mall. And so I was excited, as an Argos fan. I thought, hey, I'll go get Pinball's autograph. And I went in, got his autograph, and really excited about it. Went and did some shopping, got some lunch. A couple hours go by. I'm walking back through the mall. I'm not even aware of the fact that I'm passing by Foot Locker again. And I hear, "Hey, Ben." And I look over, and Pinball's there waving at me. And he'd not only remembered my name from a few hours earlier, which to me was like, it absolutely floored me that this professional athlete, this idol, this guy that I looked up to would remember my name even a minute after he learned it, but a couple hours later, and then recognized me and called out to me and waved to me from sitting at the table in Foot Locker. That just, it made my year. It put such a smile on my face, and I'll never forget that. And, from that day forward, that's a guy that has 100% of my respect, always. Yeah, I think his charisma and his playing skill is so dominant in people's minds, that there is a bias against seeing him as a coach. It's not what people think of when they think of a coach. And I think that, that's the kind of thing we need to change. Well, that's going to just about do it for us today on the X's and Argos podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Please don't forget to subscribe, to rate, tell everyone you know about us. For JB, I'm Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.